SAP background. I don't know if anyone noticed that there was a hiccup or something like that, because I just saw that the recording stopped for a moment. So one thing is very important from my perspective. I have a lot of experience with, but I'm not affiliated with SAP, and I don't speak on their behalf. So just making sure that whatever I say, you need to put in the right context, and it's definitely my strong opinion. Now, getting to the core of it, because I don't want to make this presentation very long, and it's really about understanding what we want to go and do if we want to go and upgrade. Now you can see here, very commonly used, fish jumps from one bowl to another, but where do we go? Which is the upgrade path that we're gonna take? And where do we actually want to end up? I guess everyone wants to end up in the biggest and nicest bowl, but the question is, do we have the time and do we want to pay for that? So some considerations, something that I actually touched on last time around in the previous webinar. So if ever you didn't see that webinar, it was more about introduction of AI influences on the new design choices of SAP and the new design principles, like this clean core, on what is happening in the SAP consulting market. So the primary consideration is clean core. This is going to heavily influence whatever you can do with your upgrade or with the choices that you need to make within the context of doing an upgrade. A secondary consideration is SAP has a relentless push to cloud. Cloud is really the direction. And if you currently have an on-premise deployment of SAP ECC, then you need to take into consideration that this is a step which will be almost inevitable for you to take. So there is a number of things that you need to do to be able to go to cloud. And SAP, the direction is full cloud. So on-premise options, I will upgrade in place and so forth. They are getting more and more difficult. Not entirely impossible, but it does make sense to go to cloud. So this is basically other concepts that we need to consider. You have that cloud story, which I just mentioned. You have the clean core, which I also mentioned. And then to be able to sustain cloud and clean core, you have side-by-side extensibility and the use of the business technology platform, where we basically build integrations or applications, solution extensions, and so forth, that basically in the past would have sat inside the core of our system. Now we'll do a short survey. Fraser, can you please put the first survey up? So this question is a bit about, when did you start preparing for your S4 upgrade? I mean, I know quite a few companies who have been looking at this for 5 years. Some of them haven't been looking at it at all. And it would be interesting for me to know where you actually stand. Oh, and we have put all the questions in the same list as far as I can see. In that case, I mean, we can answer the first one. And if you want to, you can answer the second. We can come back to the responses in a minute. Let's see. So we have some people that actually didn't start yet with their upgrades or with their preparation for the upgrades. And I'll talk a bit about that one, why it's actually a good thing to get started and why it also doesn't need to necessarily take a lot of work. People that
just to can I ask you a question? I mean, is this a sort of a consulting sort of a group, or is it just?
Sorry, can you please repeat? Moment.
Yeah, it doesn't actually. Sorry. Doesn't take. Sorry. No, I can't.
No worries. And we're here to help. So in principle, you should have a poll quiz on the screen that you can answer right now. And I see that quite a few people have answered all 3 questions, which is good. So first question, when did the preparation for your S4 upgrade started? Some, about half of the people haven't started yet. Some people more than less than a year, and some people between 3 and 4 years. Then the one thing that is, for me, a really interesting one, because I have many conversations around this, is do you consider an S4 upgrade a necessary evil? a bit so-so. Maybe some things are good, but some things are bad and it's still expensive. Or this is the right path for any organization. Will put your company on a path to being digital first and have a competitive edge. That's the second question. And then the third one is, what do you want to do, or how would you approach doing that? And we can come back to that in a minute. I'll end the poll. Thanks for your answers. And I'll come back to some of these results later. So I'm sharing the results now, which you should have on screen. Huh? All right. From my perspective, I don't see that they're displayed on your screen. In any case,
it is.
Yeah, they're on the screen. XT, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks for confirming that. It's weird that in Zoom you don't see when people see your outcomes. I just see stop sharing now. Anyway, okay. Has everyone had a look at all the 3 questions and the outcomes? If so, I'll stop sharing. I'll move on with the polls. Okay, there we go. So then, if you look at doing an upgrade, what can you really do? You can either go very simple and you can adopt the new platform, which is basically quick and dirty, lowest possible cost, and you don't want to change anything, basically. You can also look at, oh, I want to improve those things which the new platform offers and do this in the most effective way without touching too many business processes. So kind of business optimization, but not drastic change. And then you actually have a true digital innovation approach where you talk about business transformation, looking at all your business processes and reevaluating all of those. Now, I understand many of you will probably see the challenges in that because change in any organization is always difficult, but the benefits can also be significant. So this is actually when we wanted to do the second survey. What is the S4 upgrade to you? What I saw there is the majority of people think that it's a bit of a mixed bag. Some people think that it's very it's a waste of money. It's just a forced thing, while others think that it's really going to bring you a long way. And this is again going to depend to some extent on how you're going to do your upgrade. The third survey, understanding what to do, means you need to assess what you have. Here I wanted to understand who is going to hire external people and who wants to do it with internal staff, because sometimes choices here are a bit complicated. External people can have a broader view. Internal people can have a better understanding of your particular situation. Now, any vendor that you hire, you need to see that they have skin in the game. And that's why I put this one on. I always like this pig and chicken story. So basically, the moment that these guys open a restaurant together, then the pig is committed if they do ham and eggs, and the chicken is only involved. So you need to find a vendor that is not just going to be involved, but that is actually also committed, that is with you for the long run. How do we go about doing an assessment to understand where you are? We first look at this list of items that you can see here. Half of it is technical tools that SAP makes available, like the readiness check, code cruncher, and then there is documentation around operability, minimal versions, and so forth, which lead you to creating an understanding around the impact of the conversion and a selection on what you are going to do or how you're going to approach an actual migration. Now, cleaning up the core, that's a statement that in the meanwhile should be kind of clear for everyone, because SAP has been repeating that statement or that concept quite a bit in the past. We will have a separate session on cleaning up the core and what that all means in the next iteration of this webinar, because that is a quite big topic to touch on to get started. And then once you are ready, you can actually do your migration. So this is basically all the lead-in to where we need to be to understand what our migration options are. Fraser, there is someone that put some message in the chat. Can you please have a check what that is? Because otherwise I may lose track here. So the readiness check is basically a deep assessment of your existing system. And that's why I asked earlier, how long have you been engaged on this? Typically, this readiness check, in my experience and the companies that we've worked with, which are quite a few over the last few years, I see just the technical side of things easily takes 6 months, because you need to connect to your ERP environment and ideally your production environment with external tools. Setting those up has all kinds of complexities and so forth. You need to run a number of technical programs to do an assessment on table structures, code, and so forth, which will then lead to an analysis that we can use to evaluate what your complexity of upgrade is going to be. So we do custom code checks, we do validations on which functionality will be replaced and which functionality is deprecated from ECC to S4, and so forth. So there's a lot of things that need to happen in this readiness. And as a consequence, this takes time. So 6 months is short, just to do the analysis, to do the assessment. The actual analysis and the debates that follow out of this actually can take quite a bit longer. Now, in principle, everyone always thinks you have new implementation and system conversion. And I just see there is a typo in the transition thing. So sorry for that. But in principle, easy way, there is a new implementation and a system conversion. But today you also have something that they call a selective data transition. Now, I'll come to that on what that actually is. So when you look at the comparison between these three different approaches, a greenfield implementation, and this is of course where the color comes in, a greenfield implementation is basically starting from scratch. You do a new design, maybe you use your old processes as an input for this, but you basically start at the beginning, you do your entire fit to standard, which in the new world is actually the design approach that you need to follow. And after you have the design phase behind you, and depending on the size of your organization, this can take anything between 3 to 9 months, sometimes even a year. After that is done, you start a new implementation and you decide on a rollout approach and so forth. So either you do big bang, you do country by country, or so forth. So greenfield in many ways is you start from scratch with the knowledge of the mistakes and the good things that you've had from the past. The good side of this, and I guess, I mean, everyone can read, and you're probably reading this, greenfield is incredibly flexible because it offers you all options. The disadvantages of greenfield are cost, timeline, and change management. And change management in any organization is always a massive, massive challenge. Then the easy option, an upgrade. A brownfield is typically the easiest path to bring your platform to the newest version of SAP. Now, if you are still on premise, then of course this will have the added complexity that you first need to bring it to the cloud and then you migrate. Now, SAP has a number of tools for this, but if your database is very large, this is definitely going to be a complex piece of work. I mean, I've worked with some friends of mine in a very large organization, a beer brewer. Their database is about 20 terabytes or something like that. And they're currently trying to figure out how to go and do this. And it's not very straightforward. If your database is smaller, like 1 terabyte, 1.5 terabytes or below, then things become a lot easier. Now, still, a brownfield is what you have today is what you will get tomorrow, with the exception of a few functions that are deprecated in ECC. So they're no longer available in S/4HANA, and they will be replaced by some new functionalities. So brownfields, relatively quick, cost much more manageable, user impact is limited, you still have your historical data, so it's nice. The disadvantage is if your organization has changed, which many companies change over time, you acquire, you change focus and so forth, you add companies, you remove some companies and what have you, these things become complicated. You can't change organization structures that easily. You can't adjust your business processes that easily and so forth. And an upgrade has to be a big bang because the database needs to be brought down for conversion. And after the conversion, at which typically takes anything between 96 hours and 4 days. After that conversion, the whole system comes up, you do your validation if everything works fine, and then off you go. So brownfield, the time window for downtime can be a challenge, especially with heavily customized databases and databases that are very, very large, because the data conversion takes a lot of time and so forth. Now, in those cases where you have these complex situations, you have companies that you want to add, or you have companies that you want to carve out. You have a near zero downtime scenario. So you basically want to limit, because your organization is dependent on your database to be able to run its operations. If that is the case, you can look at a selective data transition. And this is what in colloquial is called a blue field migration. So what you do in a blue field migration is essentially make a copy of your existing production environment, but don't take the data and the custom code. Once this is upgraded, you will actually bring in the additional data and the old code after conversion and so forth, using a set of tools. So a blue field migration is kind of the best of worlds between a greenfield and a brownfield. It offers you a lot of additional flexibility, and it is actually it is the one that will take quite a while because of the complexity, but it gives you the best possible outcome, because you keep the best of the past, you keep your historical data, which is for finance people incredibly important, and you can limit the downtime period so your production is not affected. Downsides is cost. You require specialized tools. There are only 4 companies in the world, one of which is SAP, that have these specialized tools available. So you need to select one of those 4. And with these companies, you can then basically select data sets, functionality, and so forth that you want to bring from the past into the future. And you can then do either a big bang approach, or you can do a gradual release of go lives. So this is just a picture in a greenfield. You start from the old and you go into the new. And this is basically everything is new. Even your master data can be different and so forth. So you basically build everything from scratch based on the new design. In a brownfield migration, you use technical programs to update your system and your database. So everything gets converted from the old to the new. Whatever is in the old will still be there in the new. And yes, you need to do some retrofitting of code and maybe some corrections on database structures and so forth. And especially in the area of customer master and vendor master, the concept has changed. In the past, this was separate. And in the future, in ECC, in S/4HANA, this is what they call a business partner. So you basically have one object to cover both customer and vendor master. So in those areas, there is some changes, but it's very manageable.
Excuse me, I have a quick question. What does the double asterisk mean? Because you're being superimposed on the image and it blocks the explanation of the double asterisk.
Oh, I'm sorry. Double asterisk means change for compliance. So it's basically in master data, in ECC, you have these 2 separate objects, which is customer master and vendor master. And in S/4HANA, you have the business partner concept. And basically, double asterisks indicate there is a technical change because of the change in format between 2 objects to 1 object to cater to the same requirement. That's basically what it says. Thanks for the question. And then we have a blue field migration, which, as I mentioned, is a more complicated process where you use additional tools. In essence, you make a copy of your existing ECC, and you don't copy data or customizations. You upgrade that one, so you retain all the config of the past, and then you bring in all the additional functionalities that you developed, the ABAP and so forth. And then you can start using specific tools. You can start to populate this with additional transactional data, master data, and so forth. So it's a relatively complex process, but this one gives you the highest level of flexibility in terms of your intended outcomes. And here, in case that I'm still superimposing on the different stars, If the transactional data is basically in master data, the 3 stars, it means that you can make a selection of master data and transactional data because the tools allow you to just go either you can slice and dice whichever way that you want, either time bound or region bound or things like that. And then master data, of course, is changed for S4 compliance, and ABAP functionality also needs to be retrofitted to fit with S4HANA, because in S4HANA, some functions have changed and so forth. Much of it continues to work, but you need to retrofit these things to make sure that it works in S4HANA. In one overview, and I'm almost at the end. In one overview, if you look at the 3 main migration approaches, if you look at configuration changes and flexibility, a greenfield is, of course, one of the most flexible because you basically start from scratch, but it's very labor intensive. It's quite expensive because of the timelines. It has high complexity because of the change management and so forth. So a greenfield is something that companies really need to decide if their current existing environment is not going to be able to meet the needs anymore. Brownfield, as I mentioned, you can see the different advantages there, especially in terms of master data, innovation, and so forth. You have some options and more flexibility, and you retain all your transactional data from the past. Downtime can be a real issue. And then a blue field, you can see it has most of the boxes in a very positive fashion. Now, the one that has a very negative aspect in this area is cost, because a blue field migration, the tools that you need to buy for this are typically quite expensive because they're highly complex. And it has a difference of sometimes 50–60% in terms of cost compared to even a greenfield. So if you look at the ranking between brown, blue, and green, then brown would be the cheaper one, green would be more expensive, and blue, depending on the complexity that you introduce and the additional elements that you need, there will be an additional cost factor to be considered. So this is basically a high-level overview of the different migrations that you have to your disposal. And then I'll open the floor for questions.
Perfect. If I can get you to stop your video and stop sharing, that'd be great, Christoph. And then, so what we'll do is we'll jump back and forwards. If you could put your hands up if you've got questions. If everybody's happy to switch the videos on, would be great. And we've got a couple of questions here in the chat. So Alex Helm, to what extent, if any, can the readiness check be performed on non-SAP systems? I have a potential client who's looking to swap out all their legacy systems, non-SAP, for S/4HANA.
Well, the readiness checks are technical checks that we do against the database to see if the database can be converted to the new version. If you're basically dealing with a variety of existing ERPs and you want to migrate to S/4HANA, then that's basically just a discussion that we need to go and have on how you can engage in a process like this. We're actually currently working with a big company that is doing a migration out of 7 different ERPs into SAP. And there are standardized tools in terms of master data structures and so forth that we can use to bring them across. Typically, you would work with open balances rather than transactional data. So we would not copy transactional data out of historical other systems. And we would just migrate the opening balances into the new system with the new design and so forth. So there are no tools to do this, and the readiness check cannot do this particular thing.
I figured as much, but thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Anything else to add to that, Alex?
No, not really. It was I assumed that it was probably along those lines, but I thought it was worth asking the question. But thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess just it's moving, and just based on my experience, with S/4HANA implementations or something, particularly for international clients, because if they have multiple SAP instances, I think that brownfield and blueprint possibly would be out of question, because then I think it's better to go through the greenfield because it gives you the opportunity to redesign, bring all these in various instances together. So, I mean, I guess the, verification wise, I guess which method you go, I guess that's also part of the consideration in my view. So,
Yeah, that's true. Now,
Thoughts on that stuff?
yeah, I mean, when you say when you have multiple SAP instances, so we've been involved in projects where companies have multiple ERPs, and then they decide to take one system or multiple SAPs. Yeah, so they have an old ECC 6, they maybe have an old S4 box and so forth, and then they decide to bring these together. And you can actually do a Bloomfield migration to achieve this goal. But indeed, you need to have a discussion on process alignment and all these kind of things, which means out of the, I don't know if you have 2 or 3 or 4, you basically select one as a lead, you take those processes, you validate, and then you bring in the other systems. And through a Bluefield migration, this is possible. But yeah, I mean, politics sometimes are very complex to manage. So a greenfield often is politically easier to sell than a Bluefield.
Politics is one thing, but on the other hand, like, when you're an international organization, like, they're all localized, how to say, the customizations, or I should say configurations and, legal requirements. So I guess bringing them together, in one box, I mean, that's one challenge. Obviously, the other thing is the process wise, right? They might be using different processes. For example, the current client, which is a German company, even though they're offshoot of Caterpillar or something. So, even the, processes here in Australia is different than the one in Germany. The other one is different than, even though they are in the same, instance.
Yeah.
So even if you try to bring it, how would you do it? I mean, you need to go through I mean, what I'm saying, I guess it's case by case basis, okay, if everything runs quite smoothly, right? So you might just choose, one maybe country or inbox as an example, push it across and, maybe delta on top. Yes, maybe that's okay. I understand. But I don't know. My experience has been, okay, as far as whether it's on-premise or cloud, yes, I think private cloud, they normally go, because then it's, you get rid of all the system administration expenses and this and that. I think public cloud, I guess, wouldn't suit to the big organizations anyway. So.
Oh, that's an interesting one, actually. I didn't mention this explicitly, but if you go to public cloud, you can only go greenfield. So there is no brownfield or bluefield option to go to public cloud. Because public cloud, I mean, of course, it's based on the same technology stack, but there's so many differences between public cloud and ECC that there's just no migration path towards it. So you really need to re-implement in that case.
Look, I mean, you put it this way. I mean, when you go to the public cloud, it's pretty much top down. You just have to go and buy a no-frill, solution from SAP, because SAP doesn't let you do the configuration, ask to upgrade every 3 months. I mean, that used to be the case unless they change it in the meantime. But I mean, you are still in the private cloud. I think the system possibly sits in Greenland somewhere near the North Pole, so that they keep it. I mean, that was the previous client than this one. But yes, in that case, you can you can own your own system. But when you go to public, we had a discussion a while ago with one of the smaller companies. So you can't, because you can't even do like an interface between the third-party logistics company to your own, small manufacturing company, which was a coffee manufacturing company. So anyway, look, this is maybe, I'm deviating a bit.
Is that the same on Rise, Christoph? So if you're on SAP Rise, do you have the same limitations as public cloud?
No, you don't. When you're on Rise, you have the same or largely the same capabilities like you're on a privately hosted platform.
It's just SAP is your hosting partner, per se.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. I think there are a few other questions there, Christoph, as well. I can just.
Yeah, I'm going to come to them, Harjit. Yeah. So So next question, Paul Byrne. Are you here, Paul? Paul, just checking you're here. Yeah.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Do you want to read out the question? Easier coming directly from you, if that's okay.
Geez, can I remember it? It's 10 minutes ago. I can't see the question right now.
Yeah, basically, you agree in the database sizes. If we start with the data strategy, data retention, data archiving, and only migrate, we need the new S4HANA system. Remembering there's a lot of functionality that no longer exists an S/4HANA, meaning the data will need significant cleansing, enrichment.
Yep. So what I mean by that is very often many of the customers we deal with want to take everything forever into the new system. So if we help them by giving them with a data strategy, data retention strategy, and helping them with their data archiving, then we can actually take a huge amount of that data away, reducing the database size and bringing much less across into S/4HANA. That's what I mean. And do you agree? Am I correct or not?
You are. I mean, the detailed answer is quite nuanced, of course. I mean, from a business perspective, people want to retain everything for as long as they can. That's always the case. But when you talk to IT, they will not want to pay for retaining all the data forever, because it creates all kinds of different complexities, and the hosting cost would be very significant. In terms of conversion, if your system is heavily customized, to have a lot of custom tables and so forth, yes, for sure, migration will be additionally complicated. If you have a system that is not heavily customized, then actually, even if the data size is quite large, it's quite manageable. So there's a number of things to be considered, but when you do your readiness assessment, these are things that we definitely look into. I mean, data size, data structures, additional complexity in terms of migration preparation and so forth. But you're right. I mean, it's a big thing to look at.
So what I'm sorry, just want to add this one little piece. So it's about, for me, is educating them in the first place. You don't need all that data, because an awful lot of the data you can no longer use in S/4HANA, because that functionality has gone away.
Interestingly, in S/4HANA, you still have a lot of transactions that can work with the old ECC data structures. So if you archive it and you allow to continue to make it accessible from S4, you can use the old transactions to still display the data. So again, I mean, it's a bigger topic, actually an interesting one maybe to discuss in more detail in a separate webinar, because there's so much to be said on this one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, thanks, Paul, for the question or statement. It's good. Yeah. So let me just move on to Harish. Which vendors have the tools for Bluefield?
So there is SNP, there's Synity. So I mean, they're all German. So, and they're all companies that grew around Waldorf. So there is SNP, there is Synity, there is CBS, and there is SAP themselves. And there used to be a company called Datavard, and Datavard is acquired by SNP, I think last year or the year before. So there used to be 5, and there's 4 now.
Good. Excellent, excellent. And then Pascaline, are you here, Pascaline?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Oh, there you are. Right, you're up there.
There I am, even with face.
Thank you.
Well, it's more so just a little background is that I have been involved in the last 8 years of building an SAP SCC in a Maltese relatively small company. And they love what grandma once invented 30 years ago. So everything what they did wanted to be in SAP. So we have a lot of customized programs. And the brief input that I had before was like, yeah, customizations with S/4HANA, forget it, just go to something else instead of SAP. So for me to understand like all the customized programs, one, can we still have them in S/4HANA, and you know, recreating them? Is it just kind of having a greenfield new implementation and have to rewrite everything, or is it something in between?
Something in between. And that's actually on the, I don't remember, the 11th or the 12th of September, I'm basically going to do a pitch around this particular topic alone, which is basically core. But to give you a short answer, so after your assessment, the one that I just mentioned, the conversion assessment, readiness check, and the code check and so forth, you will evaluate for every single deviation between ECC and S4 in terms of deprecated functionality, superseded functionality, in terms of custom code. And the custom code, you have following options. So you can basically either do, you can extract the code from the ECC and make it available in a side-by-side setup if the necessary interfaces or APIs are available between the business technology platform and your core SAP. So you can then basically export the old code, retrofit it in the cloud to work in a side-by-side function.
They are still on premises, small note.
Even,
Yeah,
if
all
you
right.
clean up the core, you go to S4HANA. If they already have a license to go to S4HANA, they can do an on-premise upgrade. But in principle, let's assume that they go to cloud and they follow the clean core principle and so forth. Then you can retain all that custom code, but you, instead of running it in the core, you will run it side by side. Now, that is not possible for all code because some code really intervenes with the core programs and so forth. So in some cases, you will need to choose to rebuild whatever the functionality was that they wanted to use. So depending on the complexity, the different functionalities and so forth, you can basically port the code or you need to do a rebuild. And in that case, yes, you look at some level of work, but a lot of it is these days with SAP Build, which is a low-code, no-code platform. So some things can actually go a lot faster than they went in the past. But again, that's an outcome of the assessment that you need to go and do, and then you get your bearings and you understand what it really means for you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so any other questions? Anybody got questions? Feel free to switch your videos on, pop it in the chat. I think Harish was agreeing with you on SMP as one of the vendors. So not Harish, Joey, sorry. So any other questions? Jeff, you got a question?
Just to follow on what the earlier discussion that you were having on the private cloud and public cloud. Just to clarify, the Grow with SAP, Chris, that's on the public cloud only, right?
As far as I remember, public cloud only, yeah. In RISE, I mean, look, both RISE and Grow are commercial packagings, right? So it's just SAP bringing together a number of their products and they offer them in one package. In RISE, you can choose for either the private cloud edition or the public cloud, and Grow is really focused on the SME market, and as a consequence, they only focus on S4 public. Yeah.
And there's limited configuration setup that or changes you can do on the Grow with SAP. That's the idea, isn't it, with SAP on that one, or you can still do something? Well,
you can do quite a bit. So, I mean, in my previous life, I was part of the very first implementation of S4HANA Public Cloud. And we were very close to Waldorf when it was developed. In the initial days, it was very rigid and not very flexible because it was an early product. Now, SAP has recognized that you need a certain level of flexibility. And there is what they call in-app extensibility. So there is an ABAP extensibility framework inside S4HANA Public Cloud that now allows, to a certain extent, to introduce custom functionality in the core. But again, it's shielded from the core functions as such, only integrates at particular points and so forth. But it's definitely not the case that you can't do anything anymore.
Sorry for interrupting again, but what about all this? Like, I mean, in the past, you had to accept all these like best practice packages. I think SAP used to, publish, right? So that public cloud, you only used to allow you to use those standard processes, not allow to add more, right? So if it's like in the best practice, package Excel file, yes, you could have it. But I don't know, is it still the same or it's
evolving. Yeah, so that's what I was alluding to just now. SAP has recognized that almost any SAP customer, to a certain extent, need flexibility. And they're trying to find a balance between the flexibility offered to the customer to customize the system and assuring the continuity and the easy upgradability of the platform. Because once it's in the cloud, I mean, we all know, or most people in this call will know, once your ERP is heavily customized, every upgrade becomes a nightmare. And then it's a process that takes years, it costs you lots of money and so forth. And this is what we are now looking at from ECC to S4. But even on ECC, for many customers, when you went to EHP 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth, it was each time a freaking nightmare to get your system up to date. And with this clean core principle, SAP really follows a practice to make sure that the core is always up to date. And with hyperconnectivity, everything connected to the internet and so forth, you need to always be up to date. So that is really good. But they recognize you need to be able to do some additional customizations, which is why they gradually introduce these additional functions in a controlled manner, like the ABAP extensibility framework, like in-app extensibility and so forth, together with the side-by-side extensibility that SAP offers on BTP. So it's not as bad as it was 5 years ago. There's a lot more possible. So it's interesting to read up and continue to follow this, because a lot of things are moving in the public cloud space. It's really a platform that is becoming mature right now.
Sorry, just a further another question. Well, I mean, in my understanding, when we say customization and configuration is different things, right? Customization, we talk about ABAP programs. Configuration is IMG. I think in the past, SAP wouldn't let you touch IMG. Okay, look, you have to define your own company code and this, and it's very limited. But you couldn't go, just do your own bit, because everybody uses the same solution, right? In the end. Customization wise, yes, maybe there's this extensibility, flexibility, whatever. But I mean, that configuration limitation, I think I'm sure it's still the same, right? Is it? Because otherwise it wouldn't be called public cloud.
Yeah. I mean, there is, of course, there is guardrails in there to make sure that you can't do whatever you want. Because the moment someone touches the core code, you have the risk of destabilizing much more than one system.
So yes, right? Yeah, pretty much.
Indeed.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Moomin. That's great. Thanks, Babit. So, any other questions? Anybody got any other thoughts?
Yeah, if I've got one. Does SAP actually recommend a particular route? So, if I'm a customer and I say to SAP, I want to upgrade, what should I do? Do they have an official route, or they leave that to the ecosystem partners to discuss with the client?
SAP only has one main recommendation. You need to go to RISE, or you need to basically adopt the SAP Cloud. Apart from that, how you get there, they really leave open. I mean, SAP, you can involve SAP to do an upgrade assessment for you. And typically, I mean, depending on how you approach it, they may even do a lot of work for that for free, to give you an idea on what it all means. But then what they typically come with is, if you were to go this, then you have that, and so forth. And they basically give you the whole plethora of options rather than giving you one particular recommendation. So
there's no best practice from an SAP perspective on how to upgrade to S4?
If you do the brownfield, there is a best practice. If you do a bluefield, there is a best practice. And if you do a greenfield, there's a best practice, but not in between the choices between the three.
Well, if you do greenfield, it's pretty much the same game anyway. It's pretty much right. You just go through the normal traditional method, but you use the new SAP tools like Fiori's and whatever new tools are.
Yeah, a fit to standard approach. That's actually the new guideline in terms of how you should run your project. Start small, evolve, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, any other questions? Cool. Someone?
No, it's an interesting topic for sure. Sorry, carry on.
No problem. So a really good session, really interesting. You can see the conversations there. Everybody's got questions in this, and Christoph's going to be doing some presentations over the next months on various different topics to do with this. That's both for senior executives and junior executives to come in and get some insights on what you should be thinking. Christoph, do you want to wrap up, and then we'll close the session today?
Yeah, as a wrap up, I of course appreciate your time. If you have any further questions, like Moomin, I think we can probably talk for a couple of hours more. So if ever,
definitely, like SAP is sort of the endless ocean. For 28 years, I mean, so I only consider maybe 1 or 2% of SAP I know, maybe. So.
So just give me a ping. I would be happy to have an individual chat with any of you. And for next steps, we will be sending out a link to the recording. I'll send you the meeting notes as well. And if people are interested in the clean the core exercise, that's actually something that we, from an icon perspective, really focus on, because that's a pretty complex part in itself to be done before you actually engage on an upgrade. And we will be having a session on that mid-September, 11 or 12th of September or something like that. Yeah. So you'll also be invited.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right.
Excellent.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great job.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank you.
Thanks, Christoph.
Yeah, thanks, Christoph.
Take it. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Christoph, we're going to stay, yeah?
Yep.
Arjit, if you could stay as well, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I can.
Thanks. Cheers. Let me just few seconds, guys.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just remove.
Interesting. I thought it was.
Victory, you can head off, guys. You can all head off. That's fine. Yeah, thank you. Hey, thanks very much for all the help.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. Appreciate it. And Gail. Few seconds.
I think we're pretty much there.
Okay, that's it.
Yep. You're okay now.
Yeah.
Sophie, can you head off?
The last